There was once this artless motor car named Candide who cavorted about the countryside, honking happily and feeling deep within his differential that this was certainly the best of all possible worlds. Filled with simple joy and a few gallons of classical gas, Candide spent hour upon hour frolicking along the utopian lanes. Wow, it was wonderful. Look how wonderful it was. Then one day, Candide found himself on the road to the city, and a shadow fell across his day. The shadow of a trash truck, and a cement mixer, and a moving van full of bandwagons. But wait, let's begin this whole thing at the beginning, which in this case is as follows. Not too long ago, somebody sat down and invented the freeway. It got so popular that most cities bought a whole bunch of them to decorate the urban landscape. And they wove them together into great systems leading here and there and everywhere about the city. Whether the father of the freeway will live in history is debatable, for the thing he invented is either a blessing or a nightmare, depending on your point of view. If you know how to drive the freeways properly, then they're the safest, most convenient way to get from here to there. But if you don't, then they can truly be a nightmare, or a daymare as the case may be. And so with the help of Candide here, we're going to explore some ways you can keep out of trouble on the freeway. Ways to stay alive and healthy in one of the world's most potential hostile environments. As you remember, Candide had found himself on the road to the city, and before he could say chitty chitty bang bang, he was swept into the freeway system, heading south on north central of US 75. And if you've ever been there about 5 in the evening, you know what he was getting into. And so he escaped west to the wide inviting stretches of LBJ, or more correctly known as Interstate 635. At first, things seemed to go pretty well. And just as he began to think maybe this freeway driving stuff wasn't so bad after all, he began to notice some weird things going on all around him. He looked in his mirror and found to his horror that he had been set upon by the Road Rogues, that singularly dangerous bunch of characters who have been known to turn freeways into cemeteries at the drop of a hat. For instance, there was the unassociated road rogue. He can usually be found wheeling along the freeways at the top legal speed limit with his right arm draped across the back of the seat, his mind draped around a daydream, driving purely on luck and intuition. His thoughts are 1,000,000 miles away and his days are numbered. Then there was the rattled rogue. This dangerous character usually operates at speeds near the minimum, and his brake lights come on frequently for no apparent reason. The rear end of his car is redesigned at regular intervals. Meet the Jelly Rogue. The Jelly Rogue rarely exposes himself until he is forced to make a choice at an interchange. Then, in a flash, he turns to jelly, a quivering mass of indecision. And then there was the Roadhog Rogue. He's the one you see tailgating and speeding and cutting people off and breaking every rule in the book, and at the same time being totally convinced that all other drivers are incompetent. What can you do about the road rogues? Absolutely nothing at all. Just don't be one of them and keep out of their way. And that's just what Candide did as he breezed west on LBJ. Once you're out on the freeway, it's absolutely necessary to be constantly on the alert. Strange as it may seem, there's a similarity between freeway driving and deep sea diving. They say when a diver gets deep beneath the sea, he sometimes gets what is called rapture of the deep, a deep and peaceful illusion of invulnerability. It's easy to get lulled into this same illusion on the freeway. It seems so straight and orderly and easy, and the day is so peaceful. Remember this, no matter how peaceful the freeway may seem, things can happen, and they can happen fast. The best defense on the freeway is to avoid the possibility of being surprised. Keep your eyes constantly moving from one side to the other. And up ahead, be aware of everything happening up there for at least half a mile. Watch for slowdowns. See the brake light go on? That means he's about to do something, so be prepared for anything. Constantly glance in the rear view mirror. Watch for the cars moving up. And of course, it's especially important to watch out for trash trucks and other people entering from acceleration lanes. Now let's take another look at this. The trash truck may have cut in front of Candide, but actually, Candide is just as much at fault as the other vehicle. The right-hand lane is generally reserved for entering or exiting, or vehicles moving slower than the normal flow. And these vehicles should make way for entering traffic. See how easily this incident could have been avoided? You should always pick a driving lane that affords you the best view of traffic up ahead, and that will get you where you're going by crossing the fewest possible lanes. Here are some signs of our time. To the right, Denton. To the left, Dallas. It's time for Candide to make a decision. It's a good rule to always know exactly where you're going before you get on the freeway. But Candide, you remember, was sort of accidentally swept into the system. And so he quite correctly and carefully moves to a lane on which he can safely move in either direction while he makes his decision. Candide chose Dallas, and he moved off LBJ toward southbound Stemmons. And almost immediately he ran willy-nilly into trouble. So, hold it. At this particular interchange and at several others within and on the outskirts of the city, the two center lanes merge into a single lane. Who gives away the right-of-way? The car on the left should yield the right-of-way. But perhaps caution is the most important rule of all for both drivers. And so Candide moved on toward the city. This might be a good time to mention the one thing that causes more accidents on the freeway than anything else. And that is when people follow too close behind another car. For instance, take the case of Candide. As Candide zipped along Stemmons, he suddenly found himself crowded from the rear by a bandwagon. If for any reason at all Candide would have had to stop suddenly, he probably would have had to join the musicians' union. Now, this is the way you're supposed to follow a car, or a bandwagon. The good driver will maintain a space cushion between his car and the next. There should be sufficient space between your car and the next to be able to see around and to be able to stop in the event of an emergency. A space cushion should be equal to or greater than 1 car length for every 10 miles an hour of speed being traveled. For instance, at 50 miles an hour, you should be separated from the car in front of you by at least 5 car lengths. However, If you're only driving 10 miles per hour, one car length will be sufficient. Another way to measure a proper space cushion is to allow a 2-second space between your car and the one in front of you. As you move along, pick out a conspicuous object along the road ahead, like a sign, a light pole, or a pink unicorn. As the rear of the bandwagon passes the checkpoint, Candide begins to count.
Hey, 1001, 1002.
That's 2 seconds. If the front of the car passes the checkpoint before you finish counting, then you're too close. So let up on the gas a little and increase your cushion. It's a sort of a fact of life that every time you get a proper safety cushion established, along comes a guy who squeezes in ahead of you. Avoid the temptation to run him off the road and just fall back to reestablish your cushion. As Candide headed on toward town, he did have a few things going for him. I mean things that could keep him and you out of trouble. For instance, if he had been fatigued or ill, or if he'd been taking a cold medicine or other drugs, or if he'd been hitting the booze.
I'm tired. What so bad?
Then his physical and mental reactions would have been inhibited, and the odds of having an accident would have been greatly increased. For if Candide had an engine that wasn't properly tuned, or if his gasoline tank had been low, or if his seat belts had not been properly fastened, or if his windshield wipers had not been operating properly, or if his brakes had not been in good repair, or if his front and back lights and signal lights had not been working properly, then again, his chances of staying safe on the freeway for very long would have been very slim. However, happily, none of these things were true of our hero as he sailed the open freeway. He was shipshape, both mentally and mechanically. And when you can say that, you've gone a long way toward avoiding trouble on the freeway. Although Candide seemed to be doing pretty well at this point, he is about to have one of the most harrowing experiences a driver can have. Up ahead, Stemmons and Carpenter Freeway converge. Exiting from Stemmons across the incoming Carpenter traffic to the Irving exit is not easy. At this interchange and several others like it in Dallas, there's one major rule to follow. Whatever you do it one lane at a time. If you don't, the results may be something like this. Now, this is the way it should be done. One lane at a time, with extreme caution, courtesy, and faith. And if you haven't got any faith, and the traffic's pretty heavy, the safest thing to do would be to go on to the next exit. But this isn't getting our artless little motor car downtown, so it's back on to Stemmons. This is no great chore, however, because on the newer type freeways like Stemmons, the acceleration lanes are very long, and it's easy to reach freeway speeds. About this time, old Candide began to feel pretty good. There was the city dead ahead, a straight and easy shot right into Dallas. It looked like he had it made, but then, just as he began to relax a little, he came over a rise. And leaping lizards, he was suddenly enveloped in a weird sort of psychedelic people-eating nightmare. 4 major highways going everywhere at once, and no city. And even when you know where you're going, the downtown interchanges can be pretty frightening. But they really needn't be. For one thing, traffic moves slower here, and the signs are placed in such a way that, if you're observant, you're given plenty of directional warning. Take Candide, for instance. All he knows at this point is that he wants to get home. But how? There's a clue. US 75. That's Central Expressway. That's the freeway he started on, so that should get him back. And so he follows the signs, maneuvers into the indicated lane, being careful to watch for vehicles moving up on his right, and remembering to move only one lane at a time. At this exit, as at most freeway exits, the posted sign instructs the service road traffic to yield. But always assume the oncoming traffic won't observe the sign. Sometimes they don't, so be prepared to let them steal the right-of-way. And so at last, Candide has reached the city. Homeward bound at last. But this is a different kind of freeway than any he's traveled before. It takes some additional rules to drive it safely. For instance, take a look at this. This is just one of the things that can happen to you if you drive north central in the right-hand lane. And none of them are good. Every once in a while, like here at Washington and Lemon, the right lane simply ends and you're forced onto the service road. By the way, this service road happens to be one way, but don't take it for granted. In some suburban areas, the service roads are two-way. Always be careful to watch out for cars exiting from the freeway onto the service road. Usually there are yield signs posted, but it's a good rule of thumb to stay in the right lane of the service road. And watch those parked cars. It's a funny thing about North Central. Not only can you get swept off of it, but you can also get swept back on. Just as Candide was feeling safe and secure on the service road, he got up close to Mockingbird and got forced back on. And this, entering the old freeway like North Central, requires a different technique from that on the newer freeways where we have longer acceleration lanes. But here on North Central, they now have signal lights to help you. The lights are tied into a computer which records and analyzes traffic flow. It's actually simple. When it's red, you wait. And when it's green, you make your move. But make sure the guy in front of you has entered the traffic stream first. Then, once you begin to enter the traffic, accelerate to freeway speed as quickly as possible. Probably the greatest hazard on the freeway is the lane hopper. Obviously, there are times when you must, but there are certain rules that must be followed. Suppose, for instance, that Candide wanted to pass our old friend, the bandwagon. First, he got to make sure the coast is clear, that there is no one in the lane he wishes to occupy, and there's no one about to move up into it. Be sure to watch out for the guy who speeds up to keep you out of the lane you wish to enter. If the lane is clear, signal and make your move. Once you're in the lane, be sure you turn your signal off again. Freeway driving is always full of surprises. Very few interchanges are exactly the same. For instance, this one, North Central and Northwest Highway. Suppose Candide had a yen to take the Northwest Highway, west exit. Take a look. In order to exit, Candide would have had to completely cross a lane of incoming traffic. Legally, Candide has the right of way, but don't count on it. Sometimes the other guy doesn't know the rule. But actually, Candide didn't exit here. So let's get back to our story, which incidentally is almost over. In fact, there's just one more thing we'd like to cover. What if, just what if you're buzzing happily along and suddenly an emergency occurs? Now what? First thing you do when you become aware of the emergency is signal for a right turn and begin to move one lane at a time toward the right shoulder. Don't put on your brakes and avoid stopping on the freeway if possible. And don't panic or swerve. Usually people will provide room for you, and if they won't, at freeway speeds you will probably have enough momentum to avoid them. Once you get off the freeway off-ramp, there's nothing to do but sit and wait and ponder that long walk to the telephone. But whatever you do, don't ever walk across an expressway. To do so is to invite disaster. When you get on a freeway and manage to stay out of trouble while you're there, then you only have one major problem left. You've got to figure out some way to get off the thing. And so it was with Candide. Begin to move toward the exit lane well in advance of the actual exit. In heavy traffic, fully a mile in advance. Signs giving distance to the nearest exit are usually posted, so you can move deliberately and smoothly one lane at a time toward the right-hand lane. It's important to exit at freeway speeds. Too often a driver will begin to slow down way before his exit. As you can see, this is definitely a hazard. The 30 miles per hour sign posted at the exit means you should slow to that speed after you leave the driving lane, not before. All in all, the good defensive driver is one who knows how to recognize trouble on the freeway and then avoid it. It's really that simple. Now let's take another look at what Candide has learned about freeway driving. Make sure you and your car are in top condition and your seat belts are securely fastened. Enter service roads in the proper direction and watch out for vehicles leaving the freeway. Check your outside rear view mirror and accelerate quickly to match the speed of the freeway traffic. Use the acceleration lane to bring up your speed to that of the surrounding traffic. Keep your turn indicator flashing all through the acceleration lane. Once you merge, turn it off. When driving in the right-hand lane, be especially watchful of entering and exiting traffic and sudden stops. When you see a sign indicating merging traffic, move out of that lane as soon as you can do so safely. If you can't move out of the lane, be prepared to yield. Maintain an adequate space cushion between your car and the car ahead. Be alert to everything that's going on around you. Watch where you're going and where you've been. Help other drivers as much as possible, even if they do something wrong. And so, my friends, our story draws to a close. Candide, a weary but wiser motor car, moves homeward through the friendly countryside. Behind, somewhere in the cement labyrinth, the trash truck and cement mixers and pink unicorns and road rogues and elephants are merely memories now mercifully fading. But Candide knows if he must ever leave his gentle meadow road and head for the city, he will never be quite as innocent again. And that's how motor cars and other living things can find happiness in the Dallas Freeway System.